The hospital room was unbearably sterile. Machines beeped in a slow, steady rhythm, but to Elena Carter, each sound was a scream of uncertainty. Her mother, Margot Carter, the woman who had raised her single-handedly with quiet strength and unwavering love, lay motionless in the bed, her face pale and slack from the stroke that had stolen her voice and consciousness just hours before. It didn't feel real. Margot had always been so composed, almost invincible in her way, never a fan of dramatics, never one to show weakness. She worked a modest bookkeeping job for over 2 decades, never remarried, never talked about the past. Elena had long accepted that her father, a factory worker named John Carter, died in a car accident when she was 2 years old. Margot never offered more than that, and Elena never pressed. Now sitting at her mother's bedside, the silence felt unbearable. It wasn't just the machines, it was the weight of unanswered questions, of stories never told. The house felt different when Elena returned that evening to collect a few essentials. Too still, too quiet, as if it too had slipped into a coma. She wandered from room to room like a stranger, until her footsteps guided her to the attic stairs, an old, creaking ladder she hadn't climbed in years. Something compelled her upward. Dust choked the air. Boxes, yellowed books, and relics of decades past cluttered the space. But tucked behind an old trunk, beneath a moth-eaten quilt, she found a small, iron-clasped box. It was heavy. Locked, her heart thudded. She should have walked away, but something in her mother's silence, so absolute, so unnatural, made her pick the lock with a hairpin. It snapped open after a few tense minutes, and what spilled out shattered 30 years of belief. Old photographs, letters in Margot's familiar, looping cursive. And then, a DNA test. Elena's name was there, printed in sterile, clinical type. Her father's name was not John Carter. Instead, it read Vincent Langford. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She dropped the papers, her hands trembling. She knew that name. Everyone did. Vincent Langford, tech titan, billionaire, political power player. A man whose face was plastered on business magazines, whose name trended whenever he hinted at running for office. Her father? No, it couldn't be. She scrambled through the contents, correspondence, hotel receipts, a photo of a young Margot standing beside Vincent at what looked like a corporate gala. His arm around her waist, smiling. This wasn't a fling, this was a chapter of her mother's life she had buried. Why? Elena sat back on her heels, heart hammering, mind spinning. Everything she knew, who she was, where she came from, was a lie. Her mother's silence hadn't just been grief. It had been a fortress built around a secret that could ruin lives. And now, the only person who could explain it all was unconscious. Elena couldn't sleep. The box sat on her kitchen table like a bomb that hadn't finished detonating. Its contents spread before her, each piece a splinter in her mind. Her hands hovered over the documents, the DNA test, the photos. Every time she looked at the name Vincent Langford, her stomach twisted into knots. She Googled him. She'd seen his face before, of course. Who hadn't? But now, every photo seemed to look back at her. The square jaw, the piercing eyes, the commanding presence. Could she see herself in him? Maybe. Or maybe she just wanted to. Vincent was everywhere. Tech expos, political fundraisers, humanitarian conferences. A man too big to fail, too untouchable to question. He had a family. A beautiful wife who passed away years ago. A daughter, Grace, who seemed to follow in his every public step. The Langfords were the American royalty of Silicon Valley. Controlled, elegant, carefully curated. And somehow Elena was supposed to believe she was part of that world. She closed her laptop and stared at the ceiling. Questions chased one another in her mind. Did Vincent know about her? Had Margot told him? Had he paid her off to keep quiet? And why now? Why did the secret stay buried for 3 decades? The next morning, she returned to the box. One letter stood out, a faded envelope marked only with the initials VL, never sent. It was written in Margot's unmistakable hand. I'm sorry, Vincent. I should have told you sooner. But after what happened, I had no choice. I did what I had to protect her. Protect her? From what? Elena felt the chill creep into her bones. There were layers here, layers of fear, guilt, and perhaps something more dangerous. She stared out her window at the quiet street she'd grown up on. Her modest life, teaching art at the community center, volunteering on weekends, Sunday dinners with Margot, had always felt enough. Simple, safe. Now it felt borrowed. Manufactured. If Vincent Langford was her real father, then who was she? What else had been kept from her? And what would happen if she showed up in his world? Not as a stranger, but as a truth long hidden. The thought terrified her, but it also thrilled her. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was standing at the edge of something colossal, something dangerous and possibly irreversible. She picked up her phone and began making plans. The Langford Corporation headquarters stood like a steel monolith in the heart of the city, a fortress of tinted glass and mirrored ambition. Elena stood across the street, watching employees stream through the revolving doors like clockwork. Somewhere in that tower, Vincent Langford was making decisions that affected millions of lives, and unknowingly had altered hers before she was even born. She clutched a worn photo from the attic box. It was black and white, curled at the edges, showing a much younger Margot in a sleek dress, standing beside Vincent at what appeared to be a corporate gala. He was smiling, hand resting comfortably on her waist. Not the practice smile he wore in magazines. This one was relaxed, unguarded, intimate. The back of the photo was marked, Langford Foundation Benefit, 1992. Elena's stomach twisted. That was the same year Margot found out she was pregnant. She went to the city archives next. The building smelled of yellowing paper and faded ink, the air heavy with history. With a few names and dates, she began piecing together a timeline. Margot had been employed at Langford Corp for almost 3 years in the early 90s as a personal executive assistant to Vincent Langford. She was promoted quickly, too quickly. And then, suddenly, she was gone. No resignation letter, no retirement announcement, just a line on a staff list that ended abruptly in November 1992, a month before Elena was born. Elena found more. News articles from the same period hinted at an internal scandal involving a whistleblower, rumors of misappropriated funds from one of the company's subsidiaries. The details were vague, scrubbed it seemed, but Vincent's name had been mentioned in connection. No charges were filed. The matter was handled internally. One article mentioned a, quote, confidential settlement with an unidentified employee. No names. No follow-up. Elena's fingers trembled as she closed the folder. Margot had disappeared from public record, right when Vincent's name needed to be cleared. This wasn't just about a hidden pregnancy. This was about a scandal, a cover-up, and maybe a threat. Back home, she reviewed the letters again. Margot had written dozens, some angry, some tearful, none of them sent. She referred often to a man named E.H., an enforcer, a fixer. You promised he wouldn't be involved. I didn't say anything. I kept my word. I left quietly. I never told him she was yours. Elena's skin prickled with unease. Had her mother been silenced? Not just emotionally, but systematically erased? The affair hadn't been a fleeting mistake. It had been something deeper, more dangerous, and Elena was beginning to realize that the truth she was chasing might have been buried for a reason. But it was too late to stop. She wasn't just unraveling a family secret anymore. She was digging into something someone had worked very hard to keep dead and buried. The sense of being watched began as a whisper, a tingle at the base of Elena's neck as she left the city archives late that night. The air was cool and damp, the streets mostly empty. As she walked to her car, parked beneath a flickering street lamp, she caught a flicker of movement in her peripheral vision. A dark figure across the street, too far to make out, too still to be casual. When she looked again, the figure was gone. She told herself it was nothing. Paranoia, a product of fatigue and too many secrets unraveling at once. But the feeling didn't fade, it worsened. A few days later, she returned home from the grocery store to find her front door slightly ajar. The lock wasn't broken. Nothing appeared out of place. No drawers rifled, no signs of theft. And yet, she knew someone had been inside. The air felt different, colder, disturbed. Her mother's attic box, once hidden beneath her bed, was now shifted slightly to the left. The contents were untouched, but Elena's breath caught in her throat. She called the police, filed a report. They found no signs of forced entry. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Her thoughts spun with possibilities. Had she triggered something by digging into Vincent's past? Was someone tracking her movements? The next morning, a plain white envelope appeared in her mailbox. No stamp, no address. Just her name, written in sharp block letters. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Let it go. You have no idea what you're walking into. No signature. No return. Elena's heart pounded as she read it again and again. Her first instinct was fear, raw and primal. But then something else stirred. Anger. Someone thought they could intimidate her into silence. Someone wanted the secret to stay buried. She considered backing off, taking a break, but when she returned to the attic box, double-checking every photo and letter, she noticed something she hadn't before. One photo showed Margot at a cafe, looking over her shoulder, caught mid-smile. Behind her, barely visible in the blurred background, sat a man in a suit. The same man who had stood outside the archive building. Elena scanned the image in high resolution, enhancing the face. He was older now, perhaps 30 years older, but the sharp nose and jawline were unmistakable. He wasn't a stranger. She'd seen him before, in a photo online, standing just behind Vincent Langford at a tech conference. Edward Hale, Vincent's longtime chief of staff. She felt her stomach flip. Was he the one Margot referred to as EH in her letters? Elena's instincts screamed at her. This wasn't just about long-buried family secrets anymore. This was surveillance, intimidation, containment. And if Edward Hale was watching her, then Vincent Langford might not be as unaware of her as she thought. Grace Langford was exactly as Elena had imagined, and nothing like she expected. The first time they met, it was at an exclusive downtown art gallery, one of those silent, gleaming places where wine flowed freely and conversation was currency. Elena didn't blend in, but she had no intention of hiding. She'd sent Grace an anonymous message the day before. "I have information about your father. It affects you too. Meet me." No names, no games. To her surprise, Grace responded within an hour. "Tomorrow, Hamilton Gallery, 7 p.m., wear red." Elena wore a red scarf. Grace arrived in a sculpted black suit, the kind that whispered wealth and wielded power like perfume. She had Vincent's eyes, sharp, unreadable, and his calculating stillness. But where Vincent's public persona was warm, Grace was cold precision. She moved through the gallery like she owned it, ignoring everyone until she found Elena. "I assume you're the one who sent the message," she said, her tone clipped, eyes scanning Elena like a puzzle she didn't particularly want to solve. "I am," Elena replied. "Thank you for coming." Grace studied her, tilting her head slightly. "You have his bone structure," she said, then took a sip of wine. "But then again, a lot of people want to be Langfords these days. So who are you really?" Elena pulled a photo from her bag, the one of Margot and Vincent together at the Foundation Gala. Grace's expression didn't change, but her fingers paused on her glass. "And this?" Elena slid the DNA report across the small table they'd migrated to. "Proves I'm not just some fangirl with a conspiracy theory." Grace read it in silence. Her gaze lingered on the name, Vincent Langford. 99.97% paternal match. A tense beat passed. Then Grace laughed, low, almost amused. "Jesus Christ," she muttered, setting the paper down. "Of course it's real. Of course there's another one of us out there. I swear, the more powerful my father gets, the more illegitimate children crawl out of the woodwork." Elena's jaw tightened. "I didn't come here to beg for recognition. I came because someone's trying to scare me off." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Define someone." "I've been followed. Someone broke into my house, left me a warning note, and I'm pretty sure one of your father's people, Edward Hale, has been tailing me." That made Grace's mask slip, if only for a second. Her mouth flattened. "Hale's a ghost. If he's watching you, it's serious. And not just about the family tree." She leaned in slightly, voice low. "What do you know about the blackmail campaign?" Elena blinked. "What blackmail campaign?" Grace looked away for a moment, then back. "Someone's been bleeding our family for years. Documents, rumors, pieces of old scandals. Every few months, a threat drops. Pay, or we go public. No one's figured out who's behind it. My father thinks it's political. I think it's personal." She stared at Elena. "If you've got something in that attic box of yours that ties to it, you're a bigger piece of this mess than you realize." A long pause. Then Grace extended her hand, cool and businesslike. "We work together. I help you find out what really happened with your mother. You help me uncover who's been coming for the Langford legacy." Elena hesitated. Everything in her told her not to trust Grace. Too smooth, too polished, too dangerous. But behind her poise there was something else. Desperation. Elena took her hand, and the deal was struck. The sleek, glass-walled conference room atop Langford Tower was a world apart from Elena's modest apartment, a place where whispered secrets carried the weight of empires. Yet here she was, side by side with Grace Langford, combing through folders filled with financial reports, old memos, and confidential emails. Grace's fingers traced the margins of a yellowed document dated back 28 years. "This is when everything started," she said quietly. "The day my father's name first got dragged through the mud." Elena leaned closer. The papers detailed suspicious transactions from a Langford subsidiary, millions in funds shifted to shadow companies, documents forged to hide their trail. Yet every trail seemed to vanish just before it reached Vincent's desk. "Look here," Grace said, pointing at a memo from a reluctant employee who dared to raise concerns. This guy was Margot's colleague. She warned management about irregularities, then she disappeared. Elena's breath caught. Margot was part of this? Grace nodded grimly. She wasn't just an assistant. She was a whistleblower until she vanished. Suddenly, the room felt colder. Elena glanced at Grace, noticing the flicker of vulnerability beneath her composed exterior. "Why didn't your father stop it?" she asked softly. Grace's laugh was bitter. "Because it wasn't his doing. This was internal, a power struggle within the company and within the family. My uncle, he wanted to take control. Margot got caught in the crossfire." "Your uncle?" Elena echoed. "The one no one talks about," Grace said, voice dropping. "Vincent's younger brother. The one who's been quietly building his own empire behind the scenes." The files confirmed it. Secret meetings, covert deals, aggressive maneuvers to undermine Vincent's authority. A shadow war hidden behind smiles and handshakes. Elena felt the ground shift beneath her. "So Margot ran because she feared your uncle?" Grace's eyes darkened. "More than fear, she tried to protect you, from him." For the first time, the two women sat in silence, united by a shared, growing realization. The family's public image was a carefully constructed facade. Behind it lay betrayals, lies, and dangerous games that had shaped not only their parents' lives but their own futures. Elena's gaze fell on a folder Grace had set aside, marked simply "The Settlement." Inside were documents indicating a hush payment made to an unnamed employee shortly after Margot disappeared. Elena swallowed hard. She was bought off, Grace nodded. And now, someone wants to make sure the past stays buried. Together they looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline shimmering beneath them. A silent promise hung between them, to expose the family's secrets no matter the cost. Because some lies didn't just protect the past, they endangered the future. Elena's nights became restless, haunted by dreams of voices she couldn't quite catch, fragments of conversations, shadowy figures in forgotten rooms, and her mother's soft, trembling voice whispering, "Be careful." Determined to unravel more, Elena and Grace delved into the dusty archives of Vincent Langford's private estate, a sprawling mansion filled with secrets as heavy as the ancient velvet curtains draping the windows. Hidden in a forgotten study was a locked cabinet, dusty but sturdy. Grace's connections got them a key, and with a soft click, the door opened to reveal stacks of letters and faded photographs. Correspondence between Vincent and Margot, their words raw with passion and fear. One letter stood out, Margot begging Vincent to protect her from the growing threats of the man she feared more than anyone. Vincent's response was cold but calculated, promising help, yet hinting at compromises Elena hadn't expected. As they sifted through the papers, a chilling pattern emerged. Margot's name had been systematically erased from the Langford family history, as though she had never existed. Official records omitted her tenure at the company. Family albums showed Vincent and Grace, but never Margot. Grace's face was pale. This isn't just denial, it's a deliberate obliteration. That night, Elena found a recording device slipped under her car. Her breath caught. Someone was listening, tracking every move she made. The whispered warnings from the past were no longer just memories, they were very much alive threats. With Grace's support, Elena knew she was closer to the truth, but also closer to danger. The family's shadows were reaching out, and the voices from her mother's past were growing louder, demanding she listen before it was too late. Elena's world fractured the moment the name was whispered in the dark corners of her investigation. Margot's closest friend, Elaine Harper, the woman she had trusted most, the quiet confidant who had seemed like a lifeline in childhood. Elaine had been Margot's ally through thick and thin, or so Elena believed. But now, whispers and uncovered documents painted a starkly different picture. Elaine wasn't just a friend. She was the linchpin of a carefully orchestrated web of deception, a shadow puppeteer pulling strings from behind the scenes. Elena confronted her with trembling hands, armed with letters and photos that contradicted every version of the past Elaine had ever told her. Elaine's calm veneer cracked, revealing a coldness beneath. "I did what I had to do," Elaine said, voice steady but eyes hard. Protecting Margot meant protecting all of us. Some lies are necessary, some truths are dangerous. Her words chilled Elena more than any threat. Elaine confessed to managing the blackmail campaign, controlling the flow of information to keep the Langford family intact at any cost. She admitted to manipulating Vincent and even Margot, steering events to maintain a fragile balance between power and secrecy. But the final blow came when Elaine revealed the greatest betrayal was not Margot's lie about Elena's paternity, but a deeper, darker secret that could destroy the entire family. A secret Elaine vowed to protect, even if it meant crushing anyone who stood in her way. Elena realized that the battle for the truth was no longer just about discovering her father. It was about surviving the forces determined to bury that truth forever. Elena's world shattered anew, not from a stranger's attack, but from a betrayal so intimate it cut deeper than any blade. Elaine Harper's confession had unveiled a carefully woven web of lies, but Elena wasn't prepared for the final revelation. Someone she loved, someone she trusted completely, had been orchestrating the chaos all along. The shock came as she flipped through a hidden diary she'd discovered among Margot's belongings, a diary that chronicled not only Margot's fears, but also hinted at another presence lurking in the shadows, her own father's closest confidant, and Elena's godfather, Daniel Reese. Daniel, the man who had comforted her as a child, who had stood beside Margot during the hardest days, was implicated in secret meetings with Elaine, conspiring to silence the truth. Elena confronted Daniel in a cold, rain-soaked parking garage, the dim streetlight casting long shadows across his face. "I never wanted you to get hurt," he said, voice thick with regret. "We did it to protect you, to protect the family. But you lied to me," Elena whispered, tears mixing with the rain. "You were part of the betrayal." Daniel's silence was answer enough. The diary revealed that Daniel had been the silent guardian and the silent executioner, managing threats, manipulating evidence, and steering Margot's fate to protect Vincent's empire. His actions had cost Margot her freedom, her voice, and nearly her life. Elena realized the depth of the treachery. The betrayal wasn't just about hiding her paternity, it was about controlling her very existence. And the harshest truth? Daniel was prepared to do anything, even sacrifice her, to keep the family's darkest secrets buried. As Elena stood drenched in the storm, a fire ignited within her, not just for answers, but for justice. The game had changed. The enemy was no longer a shadowy figure outside. It was the man who had once been her protector. The final pieces fell into place in the dim light of dawn as Elena stood before the towering glass walls of the Langford family estate, the very heart of the empire built on lies. She had fought through betrayal, shadows, and whispered threats, but nothing prepared her for what lay ahead. Vincent Langford himself stood waiting, his face a mask of weary power and haunted regret. "Why now?" Elena demanded, voice steady but trembling. "After all these years, why reveal the truth?" Vincent's eyes, once cold and untouchable, softened. "Because the truth has a price, Elena, and it's one I'm finally willing to pay." He revealed a secret pact made decades ago, one that involved Margot, Elaine, Daniel, and himself, to protect the family legacy at the cost of silence and sacrifice. Margot's forced disappearance, the blackmail, the threats, they had all been desperate measures to hold a crumbling dynasty together. But Vincent also revealed the truth Elena hadn't expected. Her real father was not just a victim, but a man wrestling with his own demons, desperate to atone for mistakes that nearly destroyed them all. The confession shook Elena to her core. The man she had resented, feared, and sought answers from was flawed, haunted, and human. The moment shattered when sirens pierced the morning air. Law enforcement, tipped off by Grace and Elena, arrived to confront the corruption rooted deep within the Langford Empire. As Vincent faced charges and the family's dark secrets spilled into the public eye, Elena realized the price of truth wasn't just about unveiling lies. It was about reclaiming her own identity and forging a path beyond the shadows. Standing beside Grace with the dawn breaking over the city, Elena finally understood. Some truths come with a cost, but freedom is worth every sacrifice.